The hum of the office was long gone, the usual bustle replaced by the soft rustle of papers and the faint hum of the desk lamp. It was well past 8, and I was still at my desk, double-checking the load calculations for the Meadowfield Bridge project. This bridge wasn't just another assignment. It was the culmination of months of precision, teamwork, and late nights. I prided myself on the details, ensuring every beam and bolt aligned perfectly. "Mr. Walker?" Emma's voice cut through my focus as she knocked gently on the doorframe. I looked up, startled. "Emma, still here?" She smiled, holding her purse. "I was about to head out, but thought I'd remind you it's past 8. You've been here since before sunrise." I glanced at the clock. She was right. Time had slipped away again. "Thanks, Emma. I'll wrap up soon." "Oh," she added as she turned to leave. "Sophia called earlier. She said she wouldn't be home for dinner. Something about a late meeting for a presentation." "Thanks," I said, my voice steady, though her words tugged at something inside me. I nodded toward the door. "Go home. You've earned it." Emma nodded and left, her departure leaving the office even quieter. I leaned back in my chair, the lines of the bridge plans blurring as my thoughts drifted. Sophia hadn't mentioned a late meeting when I spoke to her that morning. She usually did. The unease was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A shadow I couldn't ignore. The drive home was uneventful, the familiar route winding through quiet streets illuminated by the soft glow of streetlights. The silence gave me space to think, and inevitably, my mind wandered back to Sophia. 5 years ago, she had been the spark that lit up my carefully ordered world. We'd met at an art exhibit, a friend's last-minute invite I'd nearly declined. I could still picture her, standing by a painting with a glass of wine, her laugh bright and unrestrained as she chatted with strangers like old friends. She'd turned to me with a smile that seemed to hold the entire room's warmth. I wasn't the kind of man who believed in love at first sight, but with Sophia, it had felt dangerously close. She was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, adventurous, and unafraid to take risks. I was steady, measured, the planner to her free spirit. Together, we balanced each other. At least that's what I'd thought. On a whim, I stopped by a florist before heading home. The bouquet of lilies I picked out felt like a small gesture, a reminder of the early days when every little thing I did for her seemed to matter. She'd always loved lilies, calling them the perfect blend of grace and strength. As I held the bouquet, I wondered when I'd last done something like this. The house was dark when I arrived. No soft glow of the living room lamp, no music playing in the background as Sophia worked at the dining table. I placed the lilies in a vase, setting them on the counter where she'd see them when she returned. The silence was almost oppressive as I went through my evening routine. I reheated leftovers, the sound of the microwave the only break in the stillness. Each clink of my fork against the plate seemed to echo louder than it should. Later, as I was settling into bed, my phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. "Sorry for the late reply. Still prepping for tomorrow's marketing presentation. Thanks for understanding. Love you." I stared at the screen for a moment, rereading the words. The message was polite, almost clinical, but lacked the warmth that used to radiate from her texts. I typed out a quick reply, "Good luck tomorrow." Then I set the phone on the nightstand, its screen going dark. Lying there in the quiet, I found myself replaying the past few months. Sophia's late meetings, her increasing preoccupation with work, the way her smiles seemed reserved for others. I told myself it was nothing, that relationships went through phases. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the growing distance between us. The lilies sat on the counter downstairs, their fragrance faint but persistent. I hoped she'd see them when she got home. But as sleep began to pull me under, I couldn't shake the thought that something was slipping away, and I wasn't sure how to stop it. The next day, I arrived at the office early, burying myself in the intricate details of the Meadowfield Bridge project. Deadlines loomed, and there was no room for error. Each calculation, every beam placement, demanded my full attention, a welcome distraction from the restless thoughts of the night before. By mid-morning, the hum of activity had lulled me into a steady rhythm. That's when Oliver Reed showed up. Oliver and I went way back. College roommates turned lifelong friends. He was a sharp architect with a knack for reading people, a skill that often put him at odds with his blunt honesty. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, leaning against the doorway with a knowing grin. "Where else would I be?" I replied, gesturing for him to come in. He dropped into the chair opposite my desk, his tone casual as we caught up on work and life. But I knew Oliver too well to think he was here just for small talk. "Listen," he said, leaning forward after a pause. "I wasn't sure if I should bring this up, but I'd feel worse if I didn't." I set down my pen, giving him my full attention. "What is it?" He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I've been hearing some chatter about Sophia and her boss, Nathaniel Bennett." My brow furrowed. "Chatter? Yeah," he said, meeting my gaze. "Some people say they've noticed them spending a lot of time together. Dinners after meetings, lingering conversations, stuff like that." A wave of discomfort rolled through me, but I kept my expression neutral. "Sophia's in marketing. Networking and client dinners are part of the job." "Sure," Oliver agreed, though his tone lacked conviction. "But there's networking, and then there's something else." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "Are you saying there's something going on between them?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I'm just telling you what I've heard. I figured you'd want to know." The conversation left a sour taste in my mouth. After Oliver left, I tried to focus on my work, but his words lingered like a shadow in the back of my mind. Sophia had never given me a reason to doubt her, and I wasn't about to let office gossip undermine my trust in her. Still, the unease was there, simmering beneath the surface. By the time I wrapped up for the day, I was ready to see Sophia in a different light. The company party that evening felt like the perfect opportunity to reconnect, to remind ourselves of the life we'd built together. I arrived at the venue early, dressed in a navy suit Sophia had once called her favorite. The event hall was already buzzing with conversation and laughter, the clinking of glasses adding to the festive atmosphere. I greeted a few colleagues and sipped a drink, keeping an eye on the door. When Sophia arrived, she stopped me in my tracks. Her dress, sleek and striking, hugged her frame in a way that made her stand out even in the crowded room. Her hair, swept to one side, framed her face with elegance. For a moment, it was like seeing her for the first time. "Ethan," she said warmly as she reached me, her smile radiant. "You look great." "Not as great as you," I replied, meaning it. She laughed lightly, a sound I hadn't heard in a while. For a brief moment, the tension melted away, and I let myself enjoy the sight of her. But as the evening unfolded, the quiet doubts I tried to suppress began creeping back. Sophia moved through the room with practiced ease, her charisma drawing people in. But it was her interactions with Nathaniel that caught my attention. He was tall, confident, and impeccably dressed, the kind of man who seemed to command attention without trying. Their conversations were lively, filled with laughter and animated gestures. More than once, I noticed how they stood just a little too close, their body language relaxed and familiar. Nathaniel leaned in when he spoke, and Sophia tilted her head, her eyes bright with interest. At one point, I watched as she rested her hand briefly on his arm, her smile lingering longer than it should have. It was subtle, something that could easily be dismissed as friendly, but to me it felt like more. I forced myself to mingle with other guests, smiling through conversations I barely registered. But my eyes kept drifting back to Sophia and Nathaniel, their connection undeniable. As the night wore on, I found myself standing by the bar, swirling the last of my drink in my glass. Oliver's words echoed in my mind, mingling with the image of Sophia and Nathaniel laughing together. I wanted to believe it was nothing. I wanted to believe in the woman I'd fallen in love with, the partner who had brought light into my life. But the growing distance between us, the late nights, the polite but empty texts, it all added up to something I couldn't ignore. When Sophia finally returned to my side, her cheeks flushed from the lively atmosphere, she smiled up at me. "Having a good time?" "Yeah," I said, my voice steady. "You?" "Of course," she said, her tone breezy. It's nice to catch up with everyone. I nodded, my smile tight. I noticed you and Nathaniel seem close. Her expression faltered for the briefest moment before she recovered. We work together a lot. It's just professional. Right? I said, letting the word hang in the air. She opened her mouth to say something, but before she could, someone called her name, pulling her back into the crowd. I watched her go, the unease from the night before now a heavy weight in my chest. The party had reached its lively peak, with laughter and conversation echoing through the hall. But I was barely present, my focus scattered. Sophia's interactions with Nathaniel replayed in my mind. Every laugh, every touch of her hand, magnified in my memory. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was looking for problems where none existed. But that uneasy feeling wouldn't let go. I was standing by a small group of colleagues, nodding absent-mindedly at their chatter, when Isabella Flores approached. She worked in accounting and was known for her quiet, observant nature. Her hesitant demeanor immediately caught my attention. "Ethan," she said softly, glancing around nervously. "Can I talk to you for a moment? Privately?" "Of course." I stepped away from the group, leading her toward a quieter corner of the room. "What's on your mind?" Isabella fidgeted with the hem of her dress, clearly uncomfortable. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but "I think you deserve to know." "Know what?" I asked, keeping my voice even despite the knot tightening in my stomach. She hesitated before speaking. "I've seen Sophia and Nathaniel meeting outside of work. At restaurants, mostly. A couple of times it was a hotel." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I couldn't speak, the room seeming to blur around me. "Are you sure it was them?" I asked, my tone measured, though my chest felt like it was on fire. She nodded. "I recognized them both. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it didn't look like work meetings. I thought you should know." I forced a smile, even as my world shifted beneath me. "Thank you, Isabella. I appreciate your honesty." After she walked away, I stood there for a long moment, her words ringing in my ears. Sophia and Nathaniel. At restaurants. At a hotel. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Maybe there was an explanation, a perfectly reasonable one. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the weight of her words. I scanned the room, searching for Sophia. It didn't take long to find her, standing by the refreshment table, deep in conversation with Nathaniel. He was gesturing animatedly, leaning in slightly as he spoke, while Sophia listened with a smile that looked too familiar. Steeling myself, I walked toward them. My footsteps felt heavy, every step carrying the weight of doubt and determination. When I reached them, they both looked up, their conversation halting abruptly. "Ethan," Sophia said brightly, her tone almost too cheerful. "I was just telling Nathaniel about the charity gala next month." "Is that so?" I asked, my voice calm but laced with an edge I couldn't hide. Nathaniel smiled, extending a hand. "Ethan, good to see you again." I shook his hand briefly, my gaze shifting back to Sophia. "You've been putting in a lot of late nights lately?" I said, keeping my tone casual. "It must be a big project." Sophia's smile faltered, just for a moment, before she responded. "It's been hectic, but nothing unusual. You know how these things go." "Doi?" I asked, holding her gaze. "Because it feels like I don't." Her expression hardened slightly, her usual warmth replaced by something defensive. "Ethan, I don't know what you're getting at, but this really isn't the time." Nathaniel cleared his throat, sensing the tension. "I should let you two talk," he said, stepping away with a polite nod. As he walked off, I turned back to Sophia. "What's going on, Sophia? You've been distant for weeks, and now I'm hearing things that don't add up." Her eyes narrowed. "What things? Who's been talking to you?" "Does it matter?" I replied. "I'm asking you directly." She crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "You're being ridiculous, Ethan. Nathaniel and I work together. That's all. Maybe if you weren't so buried in your projects, you'd see that." Her words stung, but I kept my composure. "This isn't about my work. It's about us." And right now, it feels like I'm the only one trying. She didn't respond. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The silence between us said more than her words ever could. The rest of the evening passed in a haze. Sophia mingled effortlessly, her laughter ringing out across the room, while I stayed on the sidelines, feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. When we finally left, the car ride home was tense and quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts. That night, as Sophia slept soundly beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Isabella's confession played over and over in my mind, interwoven with flashes of the party. Sophia's smile, Nathaniel's easy familiarity, her defensive tone when I questioned her. I began piecing together the subtle signs I'd ignored for months. The frequent phone calls she took in private, the guarded texts she dismissed as work stuff, the late nights and unexplained absences, even the small changes in her behavior, her sudden interest in new clothes, her excitement about work trips, felt different now, like puzzle pieces I hadn't realized were part of the same picture. As dawn broke, I realized the trust I'd always taken for granted was crumbling. I didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear. The life I thought I knew was slipping away, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The morning sunlight spilled into my office, casting long shadows over the neatly stacked files on my desk. But today, the Metafield Bridge project wasn't my focus. The unease from the night before had solidified into something sharper, a quiet but unrelenting determination. I needed answers, not rumors, not suspicions, but the truth. The first call I made was to Oliver. "I need your help," I said after a brief greeting. Oliver, ever perceptive, didn't press me for details. "What's going on?" "Something's not right with Sophia," I admitted. "I need to know the truth, and I think you're the only one who can help me find it." He was silent for a moment before responding. "Ethan, are you sure about this? Once we go down this road, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "I can't keep ignoring the signs." Oliver sighed, his tone shifting into the professional calm he reserved for serious situations. "All right, I'll look into it. Discreetly." "Thank you," I said. "Just keep it quiet." Over the next few days, Oliver provided me with updates, each one chipping away at the fragile hope I'd been holding on to. His findings were thorough photographs, timestamps, receipts. Sophia and Nathaniel had been meeting frequently, their encounters taking place at restaurants, parks, and, most damningly, a boutique hotel downtown. The evidence painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. "She's careful," Oliver noted during one of our conversations. "They keep it low-key. But the frequency, it's not just work." Hearing it confirmed, even though I'd suspected it, felt like a blow I wasn't ready for. But instead of anger or despair, a strange calm settled over me. If this was the truth, then I would face it head-on. My next call was to Matthew Collins, an old friend who had transitioned from engineering to law years ago. Matthew was sharp, pragmatic, and loyal, a combination I needed now more than ever. "Ethan," he greeted warmly when he picked up. "It's been too long." "It has," I agreed, though my voice lacked the usual lightness. "I wish this was a social call, but I need your advice." He listened quietly as I explained the situation, his occasional hums of acknowledgement the only sign he was still on the line. When I finished, there was a brief pause before he spoke. "I'm sorry you're going through this," he said sincerely, "but you're doing the right thing by staying calm. If it comes to it, you'll need a solid case. Start documenting everything, conversations, texts, emails, anything that could support your position." "I've already started," I said, glancing at the folder I'd begun assembling. Inside were printouts of text messages, screenshots of financial anomalies, and the reports Oliver had provided. "Good," Matthew said. "The more prepared you are, the better. And remember, this isn't just about uncovering the truth. It's about protecting yourself and your future." Matthew's advice stuck with me as I went about my days, keeping up the appearance of normalcy while quietly piecing together the fragments of my unraveling marriage. Every interaction with Sophia felt like a test of my composure. Her smiles, once so genuine, now seemed rehearsed. Her excuses for late nights and missed dinners rang hollow, each one another thread in the web of deceit I was untangling. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Confrontation without clarity would only give her the chance to manipulate the narrative. Instead, I focused on gathering evidence, building a case that would leave no room for denial. The quiet moments were the hardest. Late at night, when the house was silent, and the weight of everything pressed down on me, I found myself replaying old memories, searching for the moment when things had shifted. Had I missed the signs? Or had I simply ignored them, too focused on work to see what was right in front of me? But wallowing in regret wouldn't solve anything. Instead, I channeled my energy into preparing for what came next. I created a timeline, mapping out every inconsistency and unexplained absence. I printed bank statements, highlighting transactions that didn't make sense. I even backed up Sophia's messages on the off chance they revealed more than she intended. It wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity. About understanding the full scope of what had happened so I could move forward with dignity. As the days passed, my calm determination grew. I refused to let the betrayal define me. Instead, it became a catalyst for change. A chance to reassess my priorities and focus on what truly mattered. Oliver called one evening with an update. "I've got more," he said, his tone serious. "Do you want me to send it over?" "Not yet," I replied. "Let me review what I have first. But thank you, Oliver, for everything." "You do the same for me," he said. "Just take care of yourself, Ethan." The evidence sat in a folder on my desk, a tangible representation of the truth I could no longer deny. I knew the moment was coming when I would have to confront Sophia and Nathaniel, to lay everything out and demand accountability. But for now, I waited, preparing myself for the inevitable. Because when the time came, I would be ready. The days that followed were a delicate balancing act. On the surface, life went on as usual. I showed up at the office, kept meetings on schedule, and reviewed final plans for the Meadowfield Bridge project. But beneath the facade, the weight of the truth bore down on me like the steel beams I worked so hard to perfect. Sophia's behavior was becoming harder to ignore. The guarded way she answered her phone, the vague excuses about where she'd been, even the way her gaze lingered a moment too long when Nathaniel's name came up in conversation. It all pointed to something she wasn't saying. But instead of confronting her in the heat of the moment, I focused on the facts. Emotional reactions wouldn't solve this. Truth and preparation would. One evening, Oliver called with an update that made my stomach tighten. "Ethan, I've found something you need to see." "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. "There are financial discrepancies," he said. "Transfers from your shared account into a private one under Sophia's name. It's not a lot at once, but over time, it adds up." He sent over the documents, and I spent hours poring over them, highlighting the dates and amounts. The pattern was clear. Small, deliberate withdrawals spaced out over months, all routed into an account I didn't know existed. Sophia had been planning something for a while, and as much as it hurt to admit, it was obvious she didn't plan on me being part of her future. The realization stung, but it didn't paralyze me. If anything, it fueled my determination to protect what I'd worked for. Not just financially, but emotionally. I reached out to Matthew Collins again, setting up a meeting to review the mounting evidence. "This isn't just about the affair," I told him as I laid the documents on his desk. "It's about her trying to rewrite everything. The money, the secrecy. It's all part of something bigger." Matthew nodded, flipping through the pages with a practiced eye. "She's positioning herself for leverage," he said. "The transfers, the private account. It's all groundwork for her exit strategy." "Have you heard anything from her directly?" "No," I said. "But her lawyer contacted me." Matthew looked up sharply. "Her lawyer?" "Out of the blue," I explained. "They suggested we could settle quickly if I wanted a divorce." It felt rehearsed, like they expected me to agree without question. Matthew leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "She's trying to get ahead of you. She probably thinks she has the upper hand. But with what we have here, Ethan, you're in a stronger position than she realizes." The knowledge of Sophia's calculated planning left me grappling with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, even a strange sense of relief. I wasn't imagining the distance, the secrecy, the late nights. It was all real, and now I had the proof to confront it. But I wasn't ready to face her just yet. There was still more to uncover, more preparation to be done. I spent the following days documenting everything: financial records, Oliver's reports, and every interaction with Sophia that felt significant. I wanted a clear, undeniable account of what had happened and how it had unfolded. Meanwhile, Sophia's confidence in her secrecy became increasingly apparent. She continued her routine as if nothing had changed, her demeanor polished and composed. But I saw through it. The subtle shifts in her behavior, the way she avoided certain topics, even the careful phrasing of her texts. All of it pointed to someone who believed they were in control. Her confidence only strengthened my resolve. If she thought she could manipulate the narrative, she was wrong. I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story of our marriage to suit her convenience. The truth would come out, and I would make sure of it. One night, as I sat in my office reviewing documents, I paused to look out the window. The city lights stretched out before me, their glow steady and unchanging. It struck me that, despite everything falling apart in my personal life, the world kept moving. And so would I. This wasn't the end of the story, it was just the moment before the turning point. With each piece of evidence, each conversation with Matthew and Oliver, I felt a growing sense of clarity. I didn't know exactly how the confrontation would unfold, but I knew one thing for certain. When the time came, I would be ready. And this time, I would be the one in control. The courtroom was colder than I expected, a sharp contrast to the heated emotions simmering just beneath the surface. I sat at the plaintiff's table, my focus steady as the proceedings unfolded. Across the room, Sophia sat with her lawyer, her once polished demeanor now tinged with unease. The confidence she had shown in the weeks leading up to this moment was gone, replaced by a strained attempt at composure. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was the culmination of months of betrayal, planning, and hard truths. And as I glanced at the stack of evidence in front of me, I felt a quiet sense of resolve. Today, the truth would speak for itself. Sophia's lawyer opened with a narrative that painted me as controlling and emotionally distant. A man so consumed by work that I'd neglected my marriage and driven Sophia into isolation. Her accusations were calculated, her tone rehearsed, but they rang hollow in the face of the facts. When it was my turn, Matthew presented our case with precision. The financial records, Oliver's reports, the texts and photos. All of it laid bare the reality of what had happened. Sophia's secret meetings with Nathaniel, the private bank account, the late-night absences. It was all there, undeniable and meticulously documented. The courtroom was silent as the weight of the evidence settled over everyone present. Even Sophia's lawyer seemed deflated, her attempts to redirect the narrative faltering under the mountain of proof. The judge's ruling was swift and clear. Sophia's claims were dismissed as unfounded, and the court awarded me the house and the majority of our shared assets. It wasn't just a legal victory, it was a vindication, a confirmation that I had done the right thing by choosing truth over emotion. As I left the courthouse, I felt an odd mixture of relief and sadness. The chapter was closing, but it wasn't without its scars. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's life began to unravel in parallel. The investigation Oliver had hinted at snowballed into something much larger. Human resources at his company received multiple complaints from employees about inappropriate behavior and abuse of power. With Sophia's involvement now public knowledge, the scrutiny intensified. Within weeks, Nathaniel was suspended, and whispers of his misconduct began to reach the media. Headlines highlighted the scandal, turning him from a respected executive into a cautionary tale. I followed the reports with a detached interest. It wasn't about revenge. Nathaniel's downfall wasn't my victory, but it was satisfying to see the consequences of his actions catch up with him. For Sophia, the fallout was equally severe. The marketing world is a small community, and word of her affair with Nathaniel spread quickly. Her reputation, once built on professionalism and charisma, crumbled under the weight of public judgment. Clients distanced themselves, and her prospects for rebuilding her career seemed slim. She reached out once, through a carefully worded email that apologized for the pain she had caused, but stopped short of taking full accountability. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. In the months that followed, I began the slow process of rebuilding my life. The house, once a reminder of betrayal, became a symbol of renewal. I renovated the study, changed the furniture, and even planted a garden. Small changes that helped me reclaim the space as my own. The court proceedings had been public, yes, but they were also cathartic. They forced me to confront the reality of what had happened, to face the pain head-on and come out the other side stronger. I wasn't naive enough to believe the scars would fade completely, but for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. A belief that the worst was behind me and that the future, though uncertain, was mine to shape. The Meadowfield Bridge stood tall and proud, an intricate weave of steel and concrete that spanned the river like a monument to resilience. Completing it felt like a triumph, not just professionally, but personally. Despite the turmoil of the past year, I'd stayed true to myself, refusing to let the weight of betrayal overshadow my commitment to excellence. The critical acclaim that followed was unexpected but welcome. Industry journals praised the design, clients expressed newfound trust in my firm, and opportunities began pouring in. Walker & Associates became known not just for precision and innovation but also for its integrity. It was a reputation I'd worked tirelessly to uphold, and seeing it bear fruit was deeply gratifying. Life after the divorce was quieter, simpler, and, in many ways, more fulfilling. Sophia had relocated to a different city, taking a lower-level marketing position far removed from the ambitious career she'd once envisioned. Nathaniel's downfall was ongoing. His reputation remained tarnished, and he struggled to find his footing in an industry that had turned its back on him. I didn't revel in their misfortunes. If anything, I felt a sense of closure, knowing the consequences of their choices had played out as they were meant to. Justice, while imperfect, had been served. Instead of lingering in resentment, I chose to focus on growth, both personal and professional. I threw myself into the work I loved, but with a renewed perspective. It wasn't just about meeting deadlines or impressing clients anymore. It was about creating something meaningful, something lasting. Mentoring younger engineers became a new passion. I found a sense of purpose in guiding them, sharing not just technical knowledge but also the lessons I'd learned about integrity and resilience. You're going to face challenges, I told one group during a workshop. Sometimes they'll be technical, sometimes personal. But how you respond, that's what defines you. Choose integrity every time, and you'll never regret it. Their enthusiasm and determination reminded me of why I'd entered this field in the first place. It wasn't just about building structures. It was about building trust and creating opportunities for others to thrive. Outside of work, I rediscovered the simple joys I'd overlooked during my marriage. Long walks through the park, evenings spent reading by the fire, quiet moments in the garden. Each one felt like a small victory, a reminder that life didn't have to be complicated to be fulfilling. I also began reconnecting with old friends, rekindling relationships I'd neglected over the years. Oliver, ever loyal, remained a constant presence, his blunt honesty a source of comfort and humor. "You look like a man who's finally figured things out," he said one evening over drinks. "Not everything," I replied with a smile, "but I'm getting there." Reflecting on the journey, I realized how much I'd grown. The betrayal that once felt insurmountable had become a stepping stone, a painful but necessary part of my evolution. I'd learned to let go of what I couldn't control, to focus on what truly mattered, and to find strength in the face of adversity. The Meadowfield Bridge became a symbol of that growth, a tangible reminder of what was possible when you refused to let challenges define you. It wasn't just a structure. It was a testament to perseverance, to rebuilding, to moving forward. It's been 5 years since the day my life shattered and started over again. At the time, I thought that betrayal would be the end of me, but now, looking at how far I've come, it feels like a distant memory. A painful one, yes, but also the kind that reminds you just how strong you really are. My life today is something I wouldn't have dared to imagine back then. My company? Thriving. What started as a small venture built on late nights and shaky confidence has grown into an international success. We've expanded into 5 countries, and our commitment to ethical practices has not only set us apart but made us a leader in the industry. The irony doesn't escape me. What once felt like the ultimate betrayal led to a business model centered on trust, transparency, and integrity. And then there's Rachel. Meeting Rachel Mitchell was like finding something I didn't even know I'd been looking for. A neurosurgeon with an unshakable calm. She was brilliant, driven, and compassionate in ways that felt almost otherworldly to me at first. When we met at a charity event a few years back, I wasn't sure I was ready to let anyone in again. But she saw through my walls, patiently showing me what it meant to trust and be trusted again. Now, we've built a life together. A real life. The kind of life where the love isn't just spoken but shown every day in the small moments. I've got 2 beautiful kids. Our daughter Lily, who's 3, and our baby boy, James. I used to think I'd never feel complete again. But when I'm home with them, surrounded by laughter and the chaotic joy of toys scattered everywhere, I know I've found it. But it isn't just my family that gives me purpose. It's also the people I've been able to help along the way. You see, my story, the whole painful, messy thing, has become something more than just a personal history. It's turned into a way to reach others. Through my company, we've developed resources for employees dealing with workplace misconduct and personal struggles. It's a small way to give back, to remind people they're not alone, even in their darkest moments. I've also shared my journey openly, which wasn't easy at first. Talking about betrayal and heartbreak makes you vulnerable, and I wasn't sure I wanted to go there again. But the more I opened up, the more I realized how many people needed to hear it. My story became a beacon for those who felt broken, showing them that it's possible to rebuild, even after the worst. Looking back now, I don't see my past as something to run from. Sure, there were moments I wouldn't want to relive for anything in the world, but those moments shaped me. They taught me lessons I never asked for but needed to learn. Resilience, patience, and the importance of holding on to your values, even when the world feels like it's crumbling around you. The man I am today isn't the same man who once lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it all went so wrong. That man didn't know if he'd ever feel whole again. But here I am, stronger, wiser, and living a life rooted in purpose and love. And as I sit here, watching Lily try to stack blocks taller than her brother's head, while Rachel laughs from the other room, I feel something I wasn't sure I'd ever feel again. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you've taken your pain and turned it into something meaningful. The betrayal that could have broken me instead became the catalyst for something far greater than I ever imagined. It's not just my past anymore. It's my foundation. And because of that, the future is mine to build, one day at a time.